Okay, cool. So this is kind of a bit more of a condensed version of, because you both couldn't make that full day state coordinator training, but I actually think you're both pretty up to speed, because a lot of that training is like skills-based stuff, like building a group and that sort of thing. And a lot of that we went through in the retreat, because it was a longer training than the one day. So I actually think we don't have to go through all of that. I might just go through like the main things, like kind of what the role is, why the role was built. You guys just kind of interrupt me at any time and ask questions. And then talk a little bit about like feminist leadership, what that is, how that kind of plays a part in the role. And then just some not boring, very exciting group process and policy stuff, just like sign off and just sort of bits and pieces that to know about budget, that sort of thing, things that are important but not the funnest. But is there anything else before I like get started that you guys want to know about the role that I can like add in at the end or anything like that?
Don't think so at the moment.
Okay, cool. It just interrupt me, like, because it's only like 3 of us. Definitely just interrupt if you have any questions. Let me just
Sorry, I am here. I know my mute and screen is off. I'm just like doing my laundry while I'm speaking. Sorry, I am here.
No, that's all good. Okay, let me share my screen. There it is. Cool. So this is like the slides from the training that we did on the 8th of March. There you go, there's the date. So I'll just go through. You don't need to do any of this. Cool. So what is a state coordinator? So basically it would have been about this time last year, actually. I was the only organizer, and we had growing groups. It kind of all took off at once, and kind of just had like this kind of loose structure with lots of activists in different places, and all kind of reporting to like one person. Not reporting is probably not the right word, but you know what I mean, like all directing their questions and stuff to the one person. And we're realizing like my capacity was pretty like small at that time, and we weren't really supporting activists very well. So we kind of did this big research piece where I spoke to like AYCC and Amnesty, Democracy in Colour, kind of like all of these groups that were doing community organising, like on a smaller scale or like a really big scale, like Amnesty was, and kind of went through like, what's the structure of yours? Like, what do you find works, what doesn't work? And then sort of came up with like a proposal. And I think the model that was kind of looked like it would work best for us was the AYCC model. And we kind of consulted with activists, got their buy-in, like got them to think about like what would work for them. Would this new model work? And that's kind of what this process came from, and where this role was developed in that restructuring process. So yeah, I just listed some other sort of challenges we faced before having this model. Like we had this sort of gap between groups, and there wasn't like this national connectivity that we sort of have going now with these meetings, and the national meetups. Groups were very siloed, and there wasn't a lot of like frequent communication between them. And a lot of the time, for example, someone would hold an event like a clothes swap, and then another group be like, I want to organize a clothes swap, and instead of like putting those two people in touch to kind of learn from each other, we'd kind of try and bridge the gap. So a lot of it was about connecting groups and making this model like more sustainable and scalable, so we can keep bringing in new activists, but at the same time we're supporting them, and everyone's feeling very connected. So this is where we sort of landed. And I mean, it's been a year, so it's probably time we started evaluating the structure and seeing like maybe we need to restructure again. But at the moment, this is sort of what we're working with. And basically I'll start by explaining like the middle circle. We've got the campaigns team. So I think you pretty much know who that is, but you've got myself and Siri that kind of make up the organising arm. Soleil, who does like digital campaigning, which is a lot of like communications. She's the one that will write majority of like the mass emails, make the videos, post across like our social media, create like flyers, that sort of thing. Mel is in our team as well, who activists don't have much to do with, but she does the policy and research. So a lot of like the analysis of the campaigns and the solutions and alternatives, she sort of works with that. And then Lucy, who's the head of the team and sort of oversees and gives strategic direction. And then we've got 2 office-based teams. This is useful if you do need support as well. So you've got like the staff, but you've also got like office-based teams. So these are volunteers, and you've got the volunteer support team, which we actually call the activist support team now. And that's Shema and Georgie. And basically you may have been in contact with them already, but they're the ones that will process like volunteer inquiries. So if mostly through the website, we get a lot of people coming through the website, like, hey, I'm interested in volunteering. They'll get on the phone to them, say they're in Melbourne, they'll put them in touch with you. But also, so that group there is to kind of direct volunteers to you guys. But then also if you have like any issues with like you don't have any group members, or you want to build your group a bit more, they're there to really support you. And they've been trained to do recruitment, and they're really good at like posting stuff online and using all different platforms. So if you do want that support, that's there. And then the other office team is the events and outreach team, and that's Celeste and Jacqueline. And so they do a couple of things. At first, they started like building up our activist toolkit that I showed you in the last meeting, but creating resources that will help groups. They also do like events planning and logistics. So if you need to like find a venue or catering or create a run sheet or anything like that for an event, you can always send them an email and they can help you to do that. And again, yeah, they're trained in that sort of thing. They've got lots of experience in like events management. So that's kind of all what's happening in the office. And that's sort of how we try and centrally support activists. But then in terms of states, this is where you guys come in. We've got the national leadership team, and that's comprised of all state coordinators, but also the office-based teams who will kind of dip in and out of like the meetings and that sort of thing. But that's basically all the office volunteers and all the state coordinators comprise like the national leadership team. And then state coordinators support like 1 to 3 local groups each, which is kind of the next circle. And local groups are made up of community leaders, or that term is like very loose. We started off organising by just calling everyone community leaders, and that works for some groups who prefer like a more loose structure, but some groups have moved to like more structured models. Just depends on what they prefer. So some groups will have like a social media coordinator or events coordinator and outreach coordinator. And I can talk a bit more about structuring a group a bit later because we're working a bit around that, but it's personal, like kind of group preference. Every group's different. And then the last circle is like group members. So these are people who maybe come to like an event here and there, or show like aren't sort of like taking on responsibility and playing a more active role in the group. They're there, but they kind of want to be informed but not take on too much responsibility. We just kind of realized that a lot of people fit into this category, but we didn't really identify them. We always called them like community leaders, but then we also had to be aware some people don't have the capacity to really be stepping up. So that's kind of the structure. Hopefully that kind of makes sense where you fit into it. Cool. And then in terms of the responsibilities of like a state coordinator, very much about like supporting local groups and helping them to set objectives, create plans. And I think what came up in that last meeting was a lot of people are really trying to let their the people in their group take on more responsibility so that they can step back. So I guess like the goal of the state coordinator is eventually your group is like a bit more autonomous, and you can kind of take a bit more of a step back and let them sort of lead, which takes time. And it's at the beginning, it's a lot more hands-on for a lot of people. And then your goal is to kind of step people's autonomy and responsibility and confidence up with doing sort of activist things. Other responsibilities, reporting back at online meetings. So that's a monthly webinar that we do. It's on the last Tuesday of every month. So you should be added to the calendar invite. Let me know if you have any trouble accessing it or anything like that. We started off doing fortnightly, and then we just found that was way too much for people. So now we do them monthly, and I think that's good because enough time passes for things to happen and for them to be more productive. And in those meetings, I'm starting to encourage more people to chair and take minutes and take more ownership of like the meeting. It's kind of your space, and less about me sort of kind of, here is the update type thing. Like obviously I will give updates on the campaigns and the organising, but I want it to be more of a shared space there. And yeah, I guess like the idea is that state coordinators come to those. If they can't come, they send an email, and I'll add it to like the apologies section. And we always share the minutes and that sort of thing. So try your best to come, but if you can't, that's totally fine. I've already spoke about supporting the development of leaders. Recruiting new leaders to networks as well. You can do this, but there's also the activist support team to help you recruit as well if you find it becomes a little bit too much. Cool. This one I think is pretty clear already. The role is very different for different areas. So I think we kind of put this slide in the second round of training, because the first round we were like, yeah, you're going to be sort of just like the kind of overseer of groups, and then some people went in and they're like, no, I'm like building the group from scratch. So I think being clear about that from the get-go, like some state coordinators will be trying to organize a first event. Some people will be like coming into a group that's already meeting and that sort of thing. So it's really different for different areas. Some people will be doing a lot more like recruitment, other people will be doing like more events organizing. So it's just sort of gauging where your group's at, and I think you probably have a pretty good sense of that already in Melbourne, so it's good. How state coordinators engage with groups. So your role is, I guess, to give like strategic guidance. It's definitely to liaise between like staff and the group. So I guess like the people at state coordinator level, we're hoping have more capacity to kind of get a more in-depth, what's the word I'm looking for, understanding of what's going on in campaigns and organising, and then feed that back to the group. So we just, realise that every group member can't come to monthly meetings, and they don't have the capacity to be involved at that level. So that's kind of bridging that gap and liaising between. So giving the campaign updates, support on trainings. This one's optional. Last year we did a train the trainer. So we taught activists how to like facilitate and run trainings. If you are interested in running a training and that's a skill you want to like develop, or maybe you already have and you want to use, just let me know. And we've got manuals and lots of resources to do that. We had some consultants help us sort of develop a manual that was easy to deliver. So you would have seen at the retreat, Guer, Courtney and Grace facilitated parts. So that's definitely an option. I don't think you need much previous experience anyway. And then reporting and evaluating. So as like important as like setting like your group's plans and strategy is, I think we often forget to like evaluate and like celebrate our wins and do that sort of thing. So always good, like maybe at the end of the year or like mid-year, to kind of be like, what have we achieved? What have we done? What's working? What's not working? So it's kind of that, strategic guidance and kind of helping keep the group on track. Cool. In terms of expectations, State coordinators sort of expected to be engaged and in the know. So I guess just like reading emails and being responsive, coming to like the webinars, that sort of thing, is the best way to do that. Let us know, like, and I guess communicating is just like really useful for us as well. Like if, I mean, if you are flat out at work or something, just let us know, and that's totally fine. We'll stop sending you emails and following up on stuff if you let us know, because we know that emails can get a bit much sometimes. So just communicate however you're feeling, and we're happy to sort of respond. And then, yeah, report back and forth between the campaigns team and local groups. I spoke a bit about that already. What the role isn't, sort of hierarchy. We just put this one in there in case people thought like they were like the boss. I think it's still like your decision making still runs the same. Like you want to consult with groups. Like our activist network is super consultative. Even when we do something, you know, for the global strategy, we bring all of our activists together. We get them to feed in, get them to make plans, and we build on those. So yeah, definitely it's more of like a guiding role as opposed to like making decisions on behalf of the group and that sort of thing. But I think your group probably already have sort of processes around decision making, that sort of thing. And groups remain autonomous. This one's more so like there's a new person coming into groups, so maybe not too relevant for you. That's the role. I don't need to go through community organising. I think you probably know what it is. Any questions on that?
I guess I was just wondering, like, if there was, like, do you just tell everyone now that you're state coordinator? I haven't really met up with my group since, so it's like a bit like,
question.
yeah, it's like, oh, by the way, stuff.
Yeah, that's definitely a good question and a legitimate concern that we hadn't thought of. I think that was a question raised by Aaron as well in the training, so probably worthwhile us updating these slides. Because he was like, you know, I just come in and I'm like running things. What would work for you? Like we could send an email saying, because we put it out there and it was open for everyone to apply, people know that we were recruiting. So do you feel like it would be okay for us to send an email and say, Amy's the new state coordinator, this is kind of her role, and how she'll be interacting with you guys? Would that be useful? Or would you just kind of...
It would be good to like maybe do it for both of us.
Yeah?
Or like maybe even if it was like a thing, like a post in the Victorian Facebook group that would acknowledge that the three of us, Courtney, Amy and I, are state coordinators now. Like, cool. I feel like it would be helpful because I mean, I know people in my group know that I am. Yeah. It might be for everybody to know that there's support across all three groups.
Okay, cool. So you do a post in the Facebook group. Would that be enough, or do you want an email as well?
Oh, that's just a suggestion, like whatever you folks feel is appropriate.
Yeah. I think a Facebook post would be good. Now that like we've all been inducted and like we're super across everything. Something that we probably forgotten, but it's definitely important. Does that sound okay, Amy?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, cool. I'll put that as an action for me to do tomorrow. Cool. Any other questions on that kind of part of things? Yep, cool. Okay, speeding on through. I can send you this manual even if you are keen to read about it. You've already done this at your training, which is useful. Okay, building strong teams. So I won't go too much into this session, but basically Siri is developing a group structure guide. I've actually got to finalize that probably next week. And it talks about like how to structure your group and when to know what like sort of phase your group is at. And it breaks it up to like seeding, sprouting and blooming. So every group's kind of goes through like 3 phases. seeding, like when you're starting to form the group, sprouting when the group's sort of starting to meet, starting to take off, and blooming when you're like running events and things are really functioning well and you're meeting regularly. To summarize really simply, I guess I won't go through all of it now, just because I do expect that document to come up soon. But just sort of would be worthwhile you reflecting on like where your group's at, like how the structure's working, and that sort of thing. There are options to like create roles for people. That works for some groups, definitely doesn't work for others. So, and the best way I think to gauge if it will work is just to talk through it with the group. Like, how do people feel about that? Like, do people just want to have like a flat structure? Everyone kind of works on across things. But the one thing we do encourage is setting group norms. And I think probably Melbourne already has these, but if you don't, setting norms in the group, like how do we want to work with each other? We've done this in the training. I think that's really good for building strong teams as well. But the only thing I'd say on that is just keep an eye out for that document when it comes out. It hopefully gives some insights into like where your group's at and helps you reflect on where you could progress it to. Cool. Feminist leadership. This is going to be massively expanded from this like 5-minute spiel. But so ActionAid, I guess, internationally has gone on this journey to create this culture of feminist leadership. And it's something that I think is really picking up over the last couple of months. They've put together this document, like guiding principles of feminist leadership, and it's actually like practically how it comes into play in the workplace. So that's forming the basis of a lot of the training content we're developing for that one-day training. But also might be useful for me to send around. I know George has written a blog on it. But yeah, it's something that we also really want to embed within our activist network and make sure that our activists are across what like feminist leadership is and what it isn't, especially just so we have like our activists reflect our values and are reflecting the culture, and we create the culture that we really want to see. And I guess for us, the process has been like there's a lot of theory around feminist leadership, and the process that we're going on now is translating that into like how do we practically put that in place. So that's where that kind of we've created like a bit of a do's and don'ts guide, which I can send you guys as well. So these are just some quotes. I won't read through them, but basically with our activist network, we're looking to model feminist purpose and principles. So this is kind of where practicing what you preach, and our like internal politics are reflected in the way that we treat our group members and the spaces that we create within our activist network. So we want to create safe and inclusive environments for all, and looking at understanding the person is the political and breaking down like what that might mean for different people. So in like the full day training, we actually break people up and we ask them like, how can you make your group more safe and inclusive? Like, what are some things that you can do, whether it's accessibility of a venue, whether it's, setting principles around step forward, step back, so people speak equally, whether you have someone who is like the norm, we call this a norm regulator, that calls out when the norms aren't being met, and you can alternate that role. But just kind of breaking down all of the different aspects and power dynamics that might be at play in any group situation, and having a think about that. So I realize this is very like kind of a vague top level, but I will send out a bit more of a guide around this. And we'd hopefully do the one-day training as well that will make this very simple. Feminist leadership also is about inspiring shared vision. And this is also like a big kind of principle of organising is, creating collective vision and doing that together. And I always say it's like really important to check in with your vision. I think there was some study that was like, you need to be doing it like every like 2 weeks or something to make sure people remember, like, why are we even involved in this? Like, what are we doing? And reconnecting with, like, actually we're here because we are standing in solidarity with women fighting for justice around the world, like reinforcing, like, what is, you know, why are we meeting? Why is this important? Like, and really making that a shared vision, even doing like a visioning exercise as a group, like, what's your vision? How do we achieve it? And also providing space for people to connect with that on a personal level. So, for example, that exercise we did at the retreat, like having images laid out and getting people to pick an image that reflects why they are passionate about women's rights, kind of making space for that. And, you know, you can do this just having, like, watching a film that's like a feminist film and creating space for people to discuss and share experiences and that sort of thing. Empowering and enabling others to act. So recognizing the values and the contributions different people make. So I think this point kind of speaks to strength in diversity, and knowing that I did a management training recently, and they were saying that there's so much bias that you always recruit people that look like you. So for example, I totally noticed myself doing it. Like, when you're recruiting volunteers, you're like, great, like, young woman, like, has studied X at university, and I'm like, no, that's me. Like, I've just gone and like recruited myself. So kind of being aware of your own personal biases and recognizing that there's strength in like recruiting people that are really different to you as well. And not being afraid of difference, and embracing that can be strengthen your team and bring perspectives that maybe you hadn't thought about. And I think our activist network is super diverse, and I think that's why it's so good, because we do have so many different perspectives and such a smart group of people that do give us like really useful feedback and strengthen our campaigns. This point as well, creating specific opportunities for younger leaders to emerge. I think younger, you can also interchange that with any word for any group of people, but making sure that particularly for people that may not usually feel like they have the space to speak, making sure you give opportunities for people to do that, and maybe having to think about what that means in practice. Challenging patriarchal norms and oppressive power. So I think this is kind of the crux of feminist leadership. And the way I would describe it is it really flips traditional leadership on its head. So when you think about traditional leadership, or like what's practiced in like corporations or corporate structures, it's like hierarchy, very top down and patriarchal. Feminist leadership really works to be bottom up and sharing power from the bottom up. So I guess that's also very much in line with organising and the values of organising. You know, building grassroots networks should be from the bottom up, but making sure that we do remember that and check in with that, and how we sort of may play a role. And it is a lot about unpacking your own habits, and you know, we live in societies where I think we sometimes absorb things that are maybe harmful. And I mean, I can share maybe a bit more around this in some resources about kind of what that looks like. But having a think about how we can make space for others and ourselves step back. And there's this exercise that I'm planning to do in the full day one, which I think Michelle's going to run around our relationship with like power, which is super interesting, and reflecting on like when we first sort of realized that there was like a power dynamic and how it affected us, and how we use our own power and that sort of thing. So kind of reflecting on that too. The main one as well, which I think is super important, especially for groups, is this one around like heart, body and mind integration. So, and this one is really important in terms of like your group culture. I know it's been really important in our office, is making sure that we have really good work-life balance. And I think activists especially are so prone to burnout. I think it makes us really ineffective because we, there are so many things that we're passionate about and we feel like a responsibility to speak up and work on all of these things. And that means that we often burn out and we can't show up and be our best selves because we're running on empty a lot of the time. So I really like this point around making sure you're checking in with your group around self-care and how they're going, and do they need to take time off? Do they need to step back? Always making that an option. I think people feel like that option's never available for them. If someone wants to step back and then step back up later, or, all of that's totally fine. I think we just have to create space for it and make people not feel guilty when they can't do certain things. And that can be especially hard in organising because, you're always like, we need 10 people to show up to this rally, like call them, message them, just do what it takes to get people there. But in reality, people might have stuff going on in their personal life. So just making sure you are checking in with group members on that. And recognising trauma. So the issues that we work on sometimes can be really difficult for some people who may have experience with things in the past. So even with I think a training in Melbourne, we got asked by a participant to just give a trigger warning when we're going to talk about like anything related to sexual violence. So thinking about what might trigger certain reactions and making sure we're quite sensitive to that. So the activity for this, which you can maybe talk and think about in your own time, is, thinking about how we can turn these things that are really theoretical. So these are all taken from a woman called Srilatha, who's an Indian theorist around feminist leadership, and she's worked a bit with ActionAid in developing what we have now as our feminist principles. But she's super theoretical. So I guess the challenge for us has been taking this and converting it into something that's practical and gives really tangible examples for groups. So these are just a few questions that might help you reflect on how that might play out. So thinking about how you can create safe and respectful cultures, how you can challenge the traditional forms of leadership, how can you create opportunities for that empower activists, and how can we create space for self-care and work-life balance. And that's different for every group. So you can even do this activity with your groups and get them kind of across like what culture we want to create. But also, I think a lot of people from Melbourne have applied for the feminist leadership training. So hopefully we can expand on this like really short introduction to it. Cool. How does that, I know I'm going quickly, but it's just so much. Any questions? Okay, cool. We'll go into group processes. Get my notes for this. I printed out notes because this one's a little bit technical. So I'm just going to run through all the internal processes. I'm just noting that ActionAid is a DFAT accredited organisation. So there are a lot of kind of internal policies and checks and balances that we have to do to meet the criteria to get funding from the government. It's quite extensive, to be honest. So a lot of these things will seem potentially a bit bureaucratic, but it is important. And what the process is with DFAT, they come in and they basically do a very extensive audit of the organisation every couple of years, and they can ask me this is in your manual, it says that you sign off on social media posts. Can you give us an example of this? Like you say that you get activists to fill out an event planning form. Can you show us examples? All of anything really they can call on for evidence, and it's all about how you're meeting the policies. So bear with me. But so basically, the slides aren't in here for some reason. That's okay. I'll just speak through it. So with sign off, so this is a big one. If you are producing any like public facing like posters or flyers, or you want to create a Facebook event, all of that needs sign off from our communications manager. So just make sure that you give us like maybe 3 days max to sign something off. But that's just to ensure that like all of our like things that are branded with ActionAid have consistent like messaging and voice. And it's definitely not a thing of like not trusting activists. I think that's maybe been an assumption in the past, but it's like I have to get everything signed off that I put online as well, and so do all staff. And it's just like we have very strict guidelines of like what kind of voice we put out there, and making sure that we are being really like delicate with what we say, and just always good to also get someone to double check what you're publicly creating. But with Facebook events, there's a template as well in the activist toolkit that you can just fill out and send to me, and we can put that event up for you off the ActionAid account. I know some groups put them in their local groups. You don't need sign off if you're putting it in like your Facebook group, but if you want to do a public one, then it needs sign off, and then we can like also put like paid promotion behind it and try and like drum up some numbers for the event, and try and reach people who may be interested. Cool. Photo consent. If you want to post any photos, or if you're taking photos in an event, just make sure that you ask people for the consent to take photos. Super important. The next one is event planning processes. Also in the activist toolkit is an event proposal form. This one is not as used as it should be probably, but it's basically like if you want to run an event, do fill out the form, set some objectives, tell us if you need budget, or if you need materials, that sort of thing. It's really useful for us to get an idea of like what's going on, but also useful because it helps you think through like all the things that you need for an event. So definitely fill those out. That's events. Fundraising. So we've got policies around fundraising, and it's definitely a great thing if you want to fundraise for your group. A lot of groups do that like at events or market stalls, but you require like legally an authority to fundraise for your state. So if you do want to fundraise, it really doesn't take very long. Just email us, and we can make sure that we just get you to sign that form, and we've just checked that we have the right one for the right state. And we can also send you like relevant guidance around fundraising and that sort of thing. Also look out for like opportunities to fundraise, like the Strong Women Challenge. You don't need authority to fundraise for anything like that, but those things are always fun to do. Cool. Budgets. So your yearly budget, have I got the right year? Yes, I do. So I might just tell you exactly what your budgets are. You probably already know. Southeast Melbourne is $400. I think they're all $400, the Melbourne groups. And that's for the whole year. So you can use up to $400, and that covers group expenses. Like if you have snacks at your meetings, like keep the receipt and send that to us with your bank details, and we can reimburse you. What else does it cover? Like venue, catering, like event materials, like anything sort of related to your group. If you want to run a training, we have separate budget for that. Also, if you want to run a market store, we've got separate budget for that. And like social media promotion. So that really just covers like the functionings of your group and events and that sort of thing. But, don't feel super restricted, I think, by that budget. I think groups were really like tight with the budgets last year, but we do say, if there is something you really want to do, just let us know, and we can look at like how we're tracking for our budgets this year, and see, if we're not spending X amount on one line in the budget, maybe we can redistribute it. So just let us know how you're tracking with that. And we always keep it in a spreadsheet. So if you do have reimbursements. We'll just put everything into a spreadsheet. And you can always ask us, like, how much budget do we have left? And we should be able to go in and be like, you've got $300. Cool. For approval, with anything budget related, make sure you get pre-approval. Just so we have had in the past, like, groups being like, oh, we spent this much money at Officeworks. Here's the receipt, and they hadn't gotten it approved. Like, I think we're pretty lenient with that sort of thing, but the policy is, you do need to get it pre-approved just so we can not have anything come up like that. And then the last thing is child protection policy. This is an important one because we always get checked, like, rigorously for child protection, which rightly so. But we don't engage with people who are under 18 in our activist network. And that's because it requires, like, a specific level of training that we're not in a position to give. So if you think that they're, like, obviously with any event, there's the risk that, someone under 18 will come, and that's fine. We factor that into, like, our risk matrix every year. For example, if you run a market stall, under 18s may approach a stall, or they might come to an event. But I think keep that in mind, that we're not actively seeking out to engage people under 18. Like, we're not going to be going into schools and trying to recruit students. If you think that there is a chance that someone under 18 might come, just let us know, and we can sort of think about how we might manage that. But you've also all signed on to the child protection forms, which is, like, the main part of that is, like, understanding what the policy is and the risks associated. So that's everything on group processes. I think that's pretty much it, actually. So we've got a little bit of time. So if you have questions, or if there's anything you want me to run through, just, let me know. No?
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
Cool. Okay, cool.
Yeah, super thorough.
Okay, good. I've spent through it. There's so much in here that we could go through, but I don't want to keep you back too late because we've been in an hour and a half of meetings already. But what I'll do is I'll send you some resources tomorrow. But if there is anything that you think there's, like, a gap, or you don't have enough, like, knowledge on, like, let me know, and I can try, like, help you guys out, or let Siri know as well. Other than that, that's it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, guys. I'll let you get back to it. Get back to your laundry. All right.
I'm now feeding my face. It's probably good you can't see it.
I've got all this Easter chocolate next to the bed, and, like, this all these things. Could I just sneak a little bit?
Okay.
Okay, I'll stop.